This is Modern Gaming Culture. This series will attempt to highlight the phenomenon of PC, console, and mobile gaming and bring to light all of its phenomenal aspects. Let's take a dive together into the world of modern gaming and take apart its structure. Now, here's your host, Rotimi Osagi. Alright, it's Modern Gaming Culture, episode 36. Modern Gaming Culture, episode 4, I believe, of deck profiles for G Block. About Dragapults. So really enjoying doing this series. Um, when it comes to the trading card game, the trading card game is definitely the game that I've had the hardest time penetrating, right? When it really comes to examining, really, making a difference, really making my name known, right? The trading card game basically, people don't play it. That's basically one of my maxims. Nobody plays Pokemon, right? So it's not something where you should even expect something amazing to occur, right? And that's exactly what you guys expect, right? Because you guys are not quite all the way there. Let's just say. So yeah, just very troubling to even examine the Pokemon trading card game, right? It's quite a fool's errand. And so um, did a couple episodes, and now back doing deck profiles. As promised, the next episode it was going to be about Dragapult. So, yeah, we're gonna look at Dragapult set G, right? We're gonna just examine it and sort of take apart sort of a lot of the dynamics when it comes to really, yeah. So last rotation, right? That was F block. Pretty much, all these guys just stopped playing Rich Dragon, right? To get some context, that deck was just it was good. It was a good deck, right? You had cards like Dragapult, Haxorus, right, for Lugia. Um, and the deck was good, right? You could get this really heavy, um, very easy to set up Dragon Pokemon that could copy Dragapult's attack, and the deck became the best deck in format, right? That format was pretty packed, though. You had a lot of really cool decks, but the problem is generally, again, nobody plays Pokemon, so generally people play to basically make money, right? And so it's a problem where basically, you can't necessarily, you know, you know, gauge format, etc. Right? I often revisit, you know, um, formats, right, and really try to examine them. Also, because I want to, also I'm just looking through my collection too, so I have to just look through the formats, see what I missed, see what I didn't pick up for whatever reason, so that I can, decide to pick them up or not, etc. Right? And also just examine the market. So it's something where, um, yeah, I look back to F Block and just kind of how much of a travesty it was, right? I really had that format pretty much down pat. And there was just a lot of cards that just made that format, it just really was devastating, right? it's just slowly been getting worse. Pokemon, right? And so Pokemon has been trying to take steps not to sort of buck to the community because the community is just not playing the game, right? These guys, this is what they do, right? And so, they're not stupid like you. And if I'm not talking to you, don't get offended, right? So, you know, Pokemon is not going to just do whatever you guys want just because you guys say so, right? So, we've had a lot of formats, and now still you still have these cards, and there's no problem with the cards. It's just you guys don't play the game, right? And so, if you want coin flip shake, that's what you're gonna get, right? So this deck is probably gonna come back again with Badu. Um, since there's not gonna be a lot of stuff like Iono and stuff like that. Um, the format is basically going to shift towards that direction. And so since Dragapult has historically, been the deck that people have gravitated to, nothing's gonna change, right? Again, nobody plays Pokemon, so there's not really an issue when it comes to, morale, etc. Right? It's generally just what people are playing and what people are not playing, right? So, Dragapult, you know, 320, Dragon Pokemon Stage 2, right? It's got the Jet Blade attack, energy, 70 damage. And then you have Phantom Dive, Fire and Psychic, 200 damage, plus 6 damage, counters on your points, match Pokemon. Any way you like, right? So Dragon Ball kind of emerges early in formats. So yeah, Dragon Ball VMAX, right? Similar attack. I think it was 150 and 5. This is 206, right? And so, you know, we have people playing with Punny Dusknoir right now, and same shit, right? It's something where, if you want to play Lopunny Dusknoir, go ahead, right? But again, right, I've kind of tailored this profile series to kind of how the format would unfold, right? As opposed to sort of, whatever people are playing, right? Whatever. It doesn't really matter because end of the day, the format is the format, right? And Gardevoir is the best deck in format by far, right? The only reason it doesn't get results is because you guys keep playing the same decks. So, it doesn't matter how good something is, right? That's this kind of terrible mindset that you guys have, right? Where you sort of believe that because something isn't working, that means it doesn't exist, let alone if it doesn't, if it's not the best or not, right? So you guys have been sort of peddling this idea that Dragapult is a good default deck. And this is episode 4, right? So, you can go through the last 3 episodes and check out sort of, you know, um, kind of what I've been talking about. And also you should listen back, throughout all my internet publishing, you know, and really get familiar with, what I've been saying, right? Really digging into what I've been saying, right? Really looking into what I'm saying, right? So, you know, it's prophecy, quite frankly, that Dragapult is going to come back, right, as a good deck, right? We've had Obsidian Flames, the Obsidian Flames equivalent, right? With Phantasmal Flames now. And basically, that deck, the Charizard, Mega Charizard X, right? Infinite damage, really easy attack to set up, right? The issue is that, you can't basically just throw, Professor's Research and Iono and Arvid into it. Right? And so nobody's playing it. And the deck is not good because of that, right? And it's a lot different than something like Gardevoir, which is just the best deck in format, right? Um, Gardevoir is the best deck in format. And so whether or not you play it or not, it's still going to be the best deck. But with something like Charizard, right? Especially Mega Charizard EX, right? Which relies a lot on board state, right? Um, you're not going to have that similar sort of convergence, right? You can still play Gardevoir, and if you get lucky, you can still win. But if everyone's playing Kangaskhan, they're just pressing Crispin and TM Turbo Energize, and then you set up and you need 5 energies, and then they can just one shot you back, or they can just boss around, right? And you just lose the trade, right? That deck takes a lot to set up, and it's not going to have Pidgey out of rotation too. So just, you know, extrapolating a lot of these things, which are not really, it's not really even extrapolation, right? It's a trend, right? You guys don't play the game. You guys come back so you can try to make money from the game, right? And so you guys aren't even doing that, right? Because when it comes to traveling to, 6 regionals, which is your cutoff, right? Your best finish limit, right? Um, I mean, travel expenses and then how much you make, right? I mean, you guys are not cutting the mustard, right? And a lot of you guys are playing for social purposes too, right? And so, you guys are trying to make money from the game and you're not even doing that, right? So you really just gotta listen to what I'm saying because, I'm not sitting here trying to blackmail you guys. I'm not trying to do all this nonsense, right? I'm just trying to really lay out the format so that the format gets better, right? And also, this is what I do. And so, you know, I'm going to do it, right? Just like Pokemon, game design and stuff, all that stuff is what they do. That's what they're going to do. So Dragapult is going to come back, guaranteed, right? It's not going to take up the meta share like it did before because pretty much it just entered an untested format. And so people just played that deck, right? And it got 50% meta share. That's not what actually occurred. There's so many decks that beat it, right? Right at the top, you got Alakazam, right? These decks are really awesome options. And with all the pieces that you can put together, Dragapult doesn't even stand a chance, right? If this deck has 16% meta share, right? So you have to really understand how power scales, right? And that it's not necessarily, one and done, right? So this is just your run-of-the-mill Dragapult list. And the only thing I really want to highlight here, Latias EX, Megos Latias EX. So 280 basic, mega evolution. Strafe attack, energy, 40 damage. You may switch Pokemon one of your bench Pokemon. And you got Fire Psychic, Colorless, Illusory Impulse, 300 damage. Discard all energy from this Pokemon. Right? So got one to treat. And it's partnered with the Latias. And so you bench them both, and then you basically promote the Latias, and then you can attack with it, right? So a lot of people who play the card, with just by itself, and you would be pretty much loath to do that, right? But generally, you want to play with Dragapult, right, as like a finisher. So again, right, with a lot of tag team decks, just being able to take 3 prizes, right, is pretty effective. And so Dragapult has the ability to take 3 prizes, right? And I can guarantee you guys are not going to play with this, even, with delivering and, pre-production, post-production, and publishing, right, promoting, marketing, etc., will be completely futile to changing the reality that you guys are not going to play Dragapult with Megalodios, right? You're just too bullheaded, right? Your ego's in the way. And so, I don't expect, this, I don't expect this profile, let alone this series, to really determine sort of how, you guys are really cashed in on me, right? You've taken a lot of stuff from me and pretty much, used it to your benefit. And, you're pretty much, waiting for, an earthquake to happen basically before you try and do that again, right? And so, I am not under any delusion that somehow, and again, right, if you're, who I'm talking to and you made this far, congratulations, right? Round of applause, right? But, for, the adults in the room, right? I don't expect you guys to somehow pick up Megalodios Dragapult. You guys just want to collide with Urshifu, right? And so you're going to collide with Urshifu, right? And so, that's not something I expect to change in any way, shape, or form, right? I'm just putting it out there, so that, nobody can say it wasn't put out there, right? So it's a really good piece. And it's probably how I'm going to play Dragapult, right? I have all the pieces. I opened up Mega Evolution and I didn't hit the Latios, so I'm probably gonna have to just open up more Mega Evolution or maybe they're gonna print it. I think they're gonna print it in Prize Pack 8. I doubt it though. But one thing I want to highlight, with this card open, right, is its attack cost, right? So its attack cost is water, psychic, and colorless, right? And this deck plays Tatsugiri, which attack costs fire and water. And I wanted to highlight that, basically you can sort of circumvent a lot of these people who are playing like Evelto and maybe Maractus, they're pretty edgy. And you can just play water energy, right? So I play one water energy, and it basically prevents them from basically stopping you from playing the game, right? With stuff like Evelso, right? You've seen a lot of really bad stuff at regionals lately with people who are just not really all the way there, right? And so, they're just doing like this weird stuff with your Volta and Boss just because they can, right? Not really all the way there, right? Pokemon is a travesty, right? And so, that's what you'll get sometimes, right? But, this deck doesn't play Turo. It doesn't play anything like that. So your best way around it is just by playing, the water, and then basically everything your deck can attack, right? So yeah, Dusclops, Dusknoir can attack, right? With 2 psychics, and then everything else can attack. They just need water energy, right? And so, you have to just be really cognizant, right, of sort of examining events and stuff like that, so that you're not, falling into scams, right? A lot of these guys just want to scam people these days, right? They want to sort of manipulate the markets, right? Again, this is an extensive presentation series that I've done, right, about market manipulation, meta manipulation, right? And so, you can check that out, right? It's all over the place on the internet, right? Um, and so yeah, right. You just have to be very cognizant of this stuff, right? Not necessarily just falling into this stuff, right? You guys are very tricky, right? They'll come in and out of the community, and they want to talk a big game and they don't have any, right? Um, so we're doing a lot of stuff right now, so I want to just keep this brief. So now I think I've said my piece on Dragapult, right? And again, this is not a dynamic that necessarily needs, and again, right? If I'm talking to you, and you made it this far, right? Congratulations, right? That you made it this far, right? But for the adults in the room, right? This is not something I really want to harp on too much. I feel like Dragapult, again, right? People are pretty familiar with Dragapult, and so they don't need, babysitter when it comes to Dragapult. They want to show up, play Dragapult, get X1 if you're lucky, and get out of there, right? Nothing big, right? No big deal. And so that's kind of how you want to do this. And so kind of just have to examine it like that, right? Not panic, right? And just keep it cool, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's just funny because, something where, you just look back at kind of how people kind of just will try to take advantage of people, right? And you just like really have to shake your head, right? Because um when it's really time to show what you're made of, you know people just, it's a brutal disappointment. It really is, right? But at the same time, we also have to understand that this is what we do, right? And so we can't necessarily let people push us around just for the sake of, saving face, right? um you know I've been talking a lot about how, when it comes to participating in the gaming arena, right, it gets to the point where it's not even about, saving face. These are people who are trying to do their jobs, and it's really affecting their workflow, right? And so you really just have to take really drastic steps, right? And you have to just look back, be like, okay, hey, we made terrible mistakes, right? And we have to reap, what we've sown, right? But at the same time, this is what we do. And so, it doesn't matter, right? You still have to show up, right? And so, I want to just kind of leave this episode on a, I'll just close it for the former part of this episode. I want to leave this episode on a very tender note, right? That people really have to you know um empathize with people who participate in the game arena, people who are champions of gaming, right? That this is not something where you can necessarily look one way or another, right? You have to really take the dynamic as is, right? And really push through, right? A lot of this um bedlam, right? So I'll just leave it there. So it's my modern game culture. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you.